How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 1000, and in this video, of course, we're going to focus on Tropical Storm Fiona, which has a potential of developing into a hurricane and will determine the impacts you should experience around the Caribbean islands such as Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and determine if this has a possibility of impacting the United States as a major hurricane potentially. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. So let's first take a look at the composition of Tropical Storm Fiona at this time, and we do see that there is a lot of convection going on around the center circulation. However, the center circulation is located right around here, so it is missing a decent amount of convection on the western side, as there's a little bit of a pocket of dry air currently entraining the western side, which has definitely been inhibiting it from strengthening even further. Currently, it's a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm moving west at 14 miles per hour with a millibar pressure of 1,006 millibars. So it is still a relatively weak tropical storm. The dry air and the wind shear just to the north of it has helped a little bit, as we could tell that the upper level winds just to the north of this storm are a little bit stronger, with the outflow clouds pretty much drifting towards the east along with the upper level winds we're seeing induced by this upper level high that's right over this tropical storm. So over the next several days, it should pretty much maintain its strength, maybe strengthen just a little bit. There will be a little bit of wind shear and dry air that's going to continue to make this storm lopsided when it comes to its wind field, and as a result, the wind speed won't increase dramatically over the next several days. However, there's still that potential it could develop into a hurricane and potentially make landfall as a hurricane in Puerto Rico or Hispaniola. So that's only something to pay attention to, and this could rapidly intensify beyond the Caribbean islands. But we're gonna need to take a look at several different factors before we can jump to that conclusion. Now, taking a look at the current wind shear map, we do see that there's this upper level high located right over this storm, and right now the center circulation isn't entirely exposed to the strong upper level winds just to the north of it. However, it is enough that it is forcing that stable air to entrain the center circulation on the western side a little bit, which certainly has been inhibiting it from strengthening when it comes to its wind speed as this continues ahead further westward. But there's still that possibility it could strengthen into a hurricane as it approaches the Caribbean islands. Now, take a look at what the computer models are stating. So first, probably one of your biggest questions is what type of impacts the Caribbean islands will experience, such as Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and if this could impact the United States in the more long-term future. So if we were to take a look at the GFS model's latest run, the 18Z run, the latest scenario, the GFS model does take a concerning track when it comes to Tropical Storm Fiona, which could potentially develop into a hurricane, like I said. So if we were to take a look at the height anomaly right around the mid-levels of the atmosphere where the air pressure is at 500 millibars, we do see there's this big ridge that's pretty much steering this to the west. If I were to continue to move forward, this will be the main steering flow current with this storm, this ridge that's just going to be to the north of it, as it's going to steer it westward, and you see that it could potentially make landfall somewhere in between Puerto Rico or Hispaniola, either Dominican Republic or Haiti. And if I were to continue to move forward, we do see that this ridge weakens, especially on the western side. So eventually the storm is expected to take a northwestern turn, and that's always concerning when it comes to a tropical cyclone taking that northwestern turn, because it always looks like it's headed straight for the east coast. However, that's not always a scenario. We do have tropical cyclones that could easily take that northeastern turn away from the coast, but in this scenario, and it seems like what the computer models are leaning on, is that this should come uncomfortably close to the United States, but there's still uncertainty regarding the forecast, because again, look at the forecast hour I'm going at 6 days out. While it's certainly much more educated than just a guess, which is around 10 days out, between now and 6 days, there's still a lot of time for that forecast to change, but it's certainly still at least more than just a guess at this point from the computer models when we're talking about forecast 5 to 6 days out. So I'd say it's a little bit less likely this will move completely out to sea. It should move at least northwestward, but there's still a good possibility this could move out to sea. But the big question remains, how strong will the ridging be just to the north of this storm? Will the ridging be a little bit further westward and a little bit weaker to where this trough would dip down and steer out to sea, which would certainly be the best case scenario? Or will this ridge become more stronger than expected and move a little bit further eastward to where it could pick up this storm and steer it northwestward? That's the big question that remains with this track forecast at this point. When it comes to the impacts for the Caribbean islands, it's pretty much inevitable at this point. This storm will come very close enough to you guys to where you'll experience at least some impacts, and most likely you'll experience some direct impacts somewhere in between the Caribbean islands. So at this point, you should prepare for tropical storm to potentially low-end hurricane type conditions for the Caribbean islands, including Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Haiti. You guys need to prepare for tropical storm to hurricane-like conditions, especially heavy rainfall. So at this point, the certainty when it comes to the track forecasts, at least within the next 3 to 4 days, is pretty high at this point. It does become more uncertain as this moves northwestward towards the Bahamas, because again, like I said, really all depends on how strong this ridge is. What a GFS model is stating is that the ridge will be strong enough to pick this storm up and steer it northwestward to where the United States would eventually experience direct impacts, where we do see a powerful tropical cyclone move towards the North Carolina coast. And if I were to show you guys a millibar pressure of Tropical Storm Fiona at this time, which would be Hurricane Fiona at this time, look at how low that pressure is. 941 millibars. That's easily a major hurricane. That's easily touching category 4 status, which of course would be a major concern. And we do see that this moves up the East Coast, impacting a lot of the Northeast Coast states. But again, this is going very far out, so I definitely wouldn't take this seriously at all just yet for the Northeast Coast. But the East Coast should at least be aware of this storm, because if this ridge ends up being a little bit stronger than anticipated, then it would pick this storm up and steer it northwestward to where anywhere between Florida to Maine could experience direct impacts from Tropical Storm Fiona if this ridge is able to pick this storm up and force it northwestward. When it comes to what the European model is saying, what the European model is stating at this time is that it also agrees that this ridge will be strong enough to steer this to the northwest, and actually does make a landfall in Florida right around not this coming weekend, but the weekend after, towards the weekend of September 25th. Of course, it is very far out, still a lot of time to iron out the forecast, but we just need to keep in mind of the possible scenarios when it comes to the track of Tropical Storm or Hurricane Fiona. Really all depends on this ridge. But in terms of the strength forecast, because that's another thing that we're going to need to be concerned about, especially if you're in the Caribbean, where direct impacts are likely associated with Tropical Storm Fiona. We do see that the European model does expect the dry air to stick around the western side of this storm, which the good news is that should be able to inhibit it from gradually intensifying, as most likely it'll stay around its current strength at this time. It's unlikely we're going to see this completely weaken to where it completely fizzles out, or we'll see this gradually intensify into a high-end category 1. I still think we could see this potentially develop into a low-end category 1, but at least for the near future, I find it unlikely we're going to see anything more than, let's say, an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane as this approaches the Caribbean. But that's still enough to bring major impacts for the Caribbean islands, especially when it comes to flooding, where you could experience localized areas of over 10 inches of rain, which is certainly something you need to prepare for, especially if you live in a vulnerable or flood-prone area somewhere in the Caribbean islands. So definitely prepare now for the Caribbean islands. There should be a very impactful storm for you guys when it comes to rainfall and potentially wind, if this is able, especially if this is able to strengthen into a hurricane. But how about beyond the Caribbean islands? The strength forecast does become a little bit more uncertain. However, both computer models are currently agreeing that this will take a northwestern track towards the United States, and they both agree that it'll strengthen beyond the Caribbean islands. So there's certainly a little bit more certainty at this point that this will take the northwestern turn, but still, this could easily move out to sea. I want to emphasize that because a lot could change between now and 6 days. We just need to wait and see how this ridge will build just to the north of it. So, and when it comes to strength, we're going to need to pay close attention to the upper level winds as this heads further westward. Now, I don't think the upper level winds will be strong enough to really completely disorganize this storm, but it definitely will at least be somewhat of a factor in pretty much keeping the storm at bay when it comes to its strengthening and how fast it strengthens. Because if we were to take a look, there's going to be a nice upper level high over this over Tropical Storm or Hurricane Fiona, which would allow for a lot of divergence for this to potentially strengthen. But there's still that possibility that as this heads northwestward, we could see upper level trough move through Florida and enhance the upper level winds a little bit. So maybe that could potentially be an inhibiting factor as it heads further northwestward, especially since those upper level winds could steer more dry air towards the center of circulation. But at this point, it doesn't seem like the upper level winds nor the dry air will be powerful enough to completely fizzle out this storm, as I think we're at least going to see some sort of tropical entity or at least some sort of tropical storm as it heads further northwestward. And hope the best case scenario is that this weakens into a very weak tropical storm, but that's but I'd say it'll most likely stay around middle tropical storm, maybe low end hurricane status, at least in the near future. And beyond, let's say Hispaniola, that's when we could see rapid intensification, where we do see the GFS model wants to rapidly develop this storm, where we do see this drop into major hurricane status just off the Carolinas, but still a lot of time to iron out the forecast. So I'll keep you guys updated regarding the strength forecast, but I'd say at this point it should at least minimum be a tropical storm, and there's that potential beyond the Caribbean islands this will strengthen into a powerful major hurricane. So we're going to need to pay close attention to that. Now, taking a look at the taking a look, give me just 1 second. Okay, so taking a look at the ensemble members at this time, and you're probably thinking, well, this looks like good news because most of the ensemble members of the GFS and the European model are taking this out to sea. However, I wouldn't take these completely seriously compared to the forecasts based on compared to the forecast we're seeing, the main forecast we're seeing from the GFS and the European model, as well as what the National Hurricane Center is stating when it comes to the track. Because the ensemble member run right here, the ensemble member runs right here are a little bit outdated, as it seems more likely that we're going to see the storm move a little bit more northwestward, or at least the ensemble members shift a little bit further northwestward, to where United States impact is a little bit more likely than what the ensemble members show right here. There's still that possibility that we could see that shift in, of the forecast, where the ensemble members end up being the more correct scenario. There's still that possibility, but these ensemble member data you're seeing right here is a little bit outdated. So don't automatically assume that the most likely scenario at this point is that this will move northeastward, because there's still a pretty good possibility this will move northwestward, and in fact might be a little bit more likely at this point. Now, taking a look at what the National Hurricane Center is stating when it comes to the track forecast, we do have tropical storm warnings issued, as well as tropical storm watches issued for Puerto Rico, and I'd expect that to shift further westward into Dominican Republic and Haiti as the storm approaches closer and closer to the Caribbean islands. We do see that the National Hurricane Center expects this to maintain tropical storm strength, and more likely expects this remain at around high-end tropical storm status to potentially low-end hurricane status as this heads further westward, as there's still going to be a little bit dry air, and we do see the wind field is a little bit lopsided at at this point, which is definitely inhibiting it a little bit when it comes to its maximum wind speed. So definitely prepare for tropical storm to hurricane-like conditions, and we do see that National Hurricane Center wants to take this northwestward, and really at that and beyond that, it really all depends on this ridge in the United States to really determine if this will impact the United States or move out to sea. I'll keep you guys updated regarding that. And taking a look at the rain forecast associated with Tropical Storm Fiona, you do see that a large portion of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic should expect 5 to 8 inches of rain, which is more than capable of bringing major flooding. And we could see localized areas up to 12 inches, especially in the higher elevation. So pay attention to mudslides. Flash flooding is likely associated with Tropical Storm Fiona, as make sure if you see a body of water in the Caribbean islands, turn around, don't drown, because more likely than not, it's deeper than what you'd expect. So make sure to prepare accordingly, especially if you live in a flood prone area, because major flooding is expected as Tropical Storm Fiona continues to move westward. Now, taking a look at the wave height forecast. So I want to show you guys this, because even if Tropical Storm or Hurricane Fiona doesn't directly impact the United States, we still should expect extremely high wave heights along the coast. So you need to watch out for that possibility, because of course that will bring a high rip current risk, as that's pretty much inevitable at this point that we will see at least some sort of major wave heights associated with Tropical Storm Fiona, whether this directly impacts the United States or not. So make sure to pay close attention to the wave heights along the coast, because that's another concern for as Tropical Storm or Hurricane Fiona continues to move westward. Now, here's my forecast when it comes to potential Hurricane Fiona. So I do expect this to slowly intensify over the next several days, and I do expect it to get to hurricane status by late this weekend into early next week, where I do expect it to be a low-end hurricane. And then you see that by the Wednesday timeframe, I do expect a gradual strengthening process with this storm, and there is a possibility this could strengthen more than the 85 miles per hour I'm forecasting. So the United States at least needs to be aware of this. It's far from certain if this will impact you guys, but certainly a possibility at this point. And the Caribbean islands prepare for potentially low-end hurricane conditions from Tropical Storm Fiona. But anyways, guys, I think you guys watch. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. I hope you guys have a great day.